Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time of day in which you are choosing to watch these videos. Welcome back. We are on our second to last week of classes, so we're nearly there. We're really almost getting there. So final push. Hopefully you had a good weekend. You were able to do something good for your mental health. And so we can finish this semester off strongly, which would be fantastical. So just some housekeeping things before we really dive into material. Biggest thing, as per the usual, smart book reading assignments, y'all. Please, please, please make sure that you're chipping away at those. The final due date deadline is very quickly approaching, so really want to make sure that we don't procrastinate too much on that. And it's a win-win because it's helping you prepare for the final, right? So reading some of your responses to some of the discussion boards, we've kind of pointed out that there is a really good correlation between using the smart book readings as a study tool. So chapters 7 through 14 are required. 15 is optional extra credit. So there's that. You have a homework 6, which is on Connect, and that is due on Sunday. I'm not doing that to spite you or to give you more work kind of thing. It's really just to expose you to more potential questions that will be on the final, especially in terms of there's a question about the trophic pyramid, and remember I kind of talked about that on Thursday, and how that can how you'll see that question on a homework assignment and on the final. So I wanted to expose you to that as well. And any late work, remember my hard set deadline is Sunday, May 21st, less than 2 weeks from now. So if you're behind on anything, mainly like the projects or any of the other homeworks or whatever, please make sure you're getting through those and get those turned in. I am slowly but surely chipping away at grading the personal letters. So hopefully those will be completed before you walk into finals, so that you kind of have a better idea about what your grade could be. All right, that's kind of about it in terms of housekeeping stuff. Please reach out to me if you need any help or clarification on anything. I'm here to assist you. It's literally my job. So with all of that, let's get into finishing talking about Nekton. So we started talking about specifics of the swimmers of the sea, right? There's thousands of species of Nekton. And on our last class, we covered marine reptiles. If you remember the clip that I showed of Snoop Dogg narrating the Planet Earth clip is pretty dang funny. It cracks me up every time. So what we're going to talk about in this week's videos will include marine birds, fish, sharks, skates, rays, bony fish, deep sea species, perhaps, and we'll kind of see how far we get through all of that stuff. All right, so without further ado, let us get into birds. So if we consider all of the birds on planet Earth, marine birds are only 3% of the total amount of birds out there. So, by the way, to be considered a marine organism, you have to spend at least 50% of your life in the water. We'll kind of talk about that a bit when we get to marine mammals, but marine birds in particular will spend a significant portion of their lives at sea. Some may only come to shore to reproduce. Some can move into the coastal waters to feed, but everybody returns to shore to nest. So think of that this way. It's like, it's really hard to build a nest on water. It's really hard to lay eggs on water and have them float, right? So everyone's got to go back to land at some point to go and do that process. They don't produce very many offspring, and they can have a delayed maturity, but they have a longer lifespan than terrestrial birds. So for example, like penguins only have one baby, maybe two per year, or albatross only come to land every like 4 to 5 years, so they aren't really reproducing a whole lot. What's also really wild is some marine birds can nest into groups of over 1 million, and usually with multiple species. So multi-speciation is good for, of course, predators, right? So you're staying out of harm's way when you gather in these larger groups like that. Yeah, it's a whole thing. But you could imagine. If you are a nature photographer and you're going around and documenting these species or these different animals, it's going to be real stinky because that's a lot of poop. I know we talk about poop a lot in this class, but it's like it's a big deal. It's a big part of everything, and I can only imagine that does not smell very good at all. What's also interesting about and like overall characteristics of marine birds is that they swim at the surface and they can swim underwater because they have webbed footies, right? And they also have feathers that are waterproofed by oily secretion and air that is trapped within their feathers, so that when they come up out of the water, they're not like weighed down with water, if that makes sense. So they're basically entirely waterproof. Which obviously is a sort of adaptation that they have to have if they want to continue to fly afterwards, right? It's a little hard to fly if you are weighted down with water. Birds also have incredibly well-developed eyesight, but they can't hear very well, and underdeveloped hearing and smell, but they have very, very underdeveloped sense of taste. So they basically just eat whatever they can. But because they have such good eyesight, that's why they can just fly over water and see fish and go down and dive for fish. They are huge eaters. They got to eat a lot because they are basically doing a lot of activity all of the time. They're flying a majority of the time, right? So if you're flapping your wings, that's gonna require a lot of energy. And they metabolize their food really quickly. And if we see a large presence of birds, that is a very good indicator of a highly productive area, meaning that there's some sort of maybe plankton bloom at the surface, which is causing little fish to come, which is maybe causing bigger fish to come. And then these birds are like, oh my God, fish. And then and they come in and swoop in and get their food. I think I've maybe talked about this before, and if I haven't, here we go. I've been really into watching the show Alone as of recently. Great show. Basically, people are dumped out into the middle of nowhere and they have to survive on their own. And one of the episodes, one of the guys was able to be like, oh, there's probably fish there because there's a lot of birds in the water. And then he was able, because he was having a really hard time fishing. And so he used that indicator to guide him to the next, guide him to go fish there. So when we talk about marine birds, there's basically 4 different groups of birds that your book goes into. So we're going to go through them, several examples of them here. So first group, these are the albatross, petrels, fulmars, and shearwaters. This image here is on the right is of a wandering albatross and has the longest wingspan of all of the birdie birds, 11 feet long. This is crazy. Look at that freaking wingspan. But that's because they spend 4 to 5 years at sea before they return to nesting sites. They're the mostly truly oceanic of all marine birds. We see different types of albatross down in Monterey, which is really cool. And if you ever want a good laugh, because they don't come to land very often, they don't really know how to land very well or take off, and it's really quite funny. Maybe I'll try and find some and have them as little extra videos or whatever. Next up, we have the penguins. So penguins can't fly because their wings are modified to be flippers so that they can swim. And all but one species actually live in the southern hemisphere. So mostly Antarctica, but also different other glacial parts of the southern hemisphere. They have a very thick layer of fat, which has them adapted to be in these extremely cold conditions. These are really cute, I think, African penguins here. And they actually have several of these down in Monterey as well. Next up, we have the group of pelicans, cormorants, boobies, and frigate birds. So these types of birds can have, they're very large fishing birds with really big beaks. Pelicans also have a little pouchy pouch on their beaks, which are used to catch fish. The way to remember that, of course, thinking back to Finding Nemo, right, where they almost get eaten by the pelican. And then what's interesting about cormorants is they do not have water repellent feathers, so they have to return to shore to dry off. So they go into the water to hunt, but then they have to come back to land to like ruffle their feathers and dry off a bit. Next up, we have gulls, terns, and alcids. So gulls are very strong flyers and will eat anything. I mean, think about, the last time maybe you went to the beach, had a beach day with a cooler and some snacks or whatever. You've probably seen them trying to eat everything. It's really wild. And then terns are these little cuties here. These are small, graceful little birds with very slender bills and forked tails. So another aspect, or maybe some birds that you've seen, like maybe if you've gone to the beach, there are some birds that live along the coastline but are not technically marine birds because they spend more of their time on land, but they will often, like plovers, for example, the California plover is very vital to local ecosystems, but it's not technically a marine bird because it doesn't spend most of its time on land or in the water. So just pointing all of that out there. So that will wrap up talking about little birdie birds. Our next videos will talk about some of the other fun little Nekton that exist in our waters. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.